Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, it is truly a privilege to introduce a amazing lady that I met now about a month ago in Houston. She was doing a seminar for our company, and I was just overwhelmed with the tremendous knowledge and information that she imparted. Things that I had never thought about, things that perhaps other leaders had never thought about, really how the mind works and how it needs to think properly to create a big business. So Maria Teresa Zavala, it is my honor and privilege to welcome you to the Leaving Nothing to Chance podcast today. How are you?
I'm delighted. Thank you very much, John, of meeting you and your audience and sharing a little bit of what I have been doing and learning throughout the years. Thank you.
Well, you've been a very good student and a wonderful presenter as well. So let's start with the first question, Maria. What are the best success habits to practice to become successful in network marketing?
Well, the first one is define your objective. When we don't know where to go, no path will lead us anywhere. So the first one is knowing and recognizing where do we want to go to? What is our final point? As Steve, well, I have been studying with John Grinder, and in every case, we started with the idea of begin with the end in your mind. If you don't create the end in your mind, any road will lead you anywhere.
Wow. Yeah, begin with the end in mind makes a lot of sense, and not just in multi-level marketing or network marketing, but probably anything that we start in life, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's talk about success. And this is a difficult question to ask and certainly to answer, but what is the purpose of success in life?
I think there are different varieties of success because it depends on your point of evolution. If you're thriving for the external success, success would be to have an A score in whatever you're studying, or make big money, or have a big house, or be better than someone else. Those are the external drivers, but there are an amount of internal drivers that are more permanent than the external ones. And those go for having a peace of mind, contributing with your talents, be part of something greater than yourself, and help many people around yourself. So most of our success definitions depend on what is the purpose we are following in life.
So it's kind of like the results are important, but how we feel about ourselves getting those results is more important. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's like a pilot who's driving from, let's say, Mexico, where I live, to New York. If you want, you're going to get to New York, it doesn't matter where you go. Your definition of where you want to get to is mandatory. And so there might be certain storms or wind, etc., that drive you off your score. But if you know where you want to go and what is the inner message that you're creating along the road, this is going to be more important.
So let's talk a little bit. And it was the first time I had ever heard this referred to this way, but reptile thinking, I think it's really important for our listeners to understand what that is.
Thank you. Yes. When we are only in an egg inside of the womb, we start with the cellular division. And there's a notochord or a small line that is being formed throughout our division. And the first part of this division creates the notochord and the central nervous system. The way it evolves is a small area in the brain. Let me show you how it looks like. In here, you can see this area that is formed in the first 3 months of evolution in the body. And this is going to have the purpose of, number one, protecting us, keeping us alive, and keeping us safe of any danger that might be around us. This is called the reptile brain, and is going to be working throughout your life in any moment where you feel threatened or exposed. Now, after the COVID, well, in Mexico, we are still with everything paralyzed and closed, but people feel threatened in a survival mode. And the only three responses there are in this level of the brain is you either attack, or you get paralyzed or frozen, or you want to escape, you run away. So when you see a person being very aggressive, or not knowing where to go, or wanting to go away from any situation, you can immediately understand that people feel are living at this stage of the brain that is not really very intelligent, but is reactive.
Mm. And what percentage of the brain, when we're conscious, do most people actually use?
Well, Dr. Abersol, that is a neuroscientist I have been studying, says we use 0.01% of our mental skills. Mm. Why? Because the brain is formed by a very large number of neurons and connections. But the way we learn is by conditioning ourselves. So we start forming lines or paths of behavior that in science we say are around 70,000 thoughts every day. The negative thing of this is that the next day we have the same 70 ways of thinking, but they are the same. They are not new, because human beings like comfort, like to feel safe, and like to know that whatever they are doing is correct. So we form these paths of behavior that determine who we are, determine our personality, our way of doing things, and they are going to be usually the same. They define us. And one of the things I have been exploring is how to create new connections, how to make people learn, help people learn in new ways. And it's fascinating because once you are detached of the basic brain, the reptilian brain, your mind will develop new learning skills that are amazing. They can lead you to learn a language in a week, to develop a business maybe in 2 months. But it's only about daring, about learning how to use new areas of your brain.
Amazing. It's incredible when you hear this type of stuff. So let me ask you this. Habits. Because the brain forms habits, of course, right, that we then follow through with, physically, take from an activity standpoint. and there's good habits, obviously, and there's bad habits, right? More important than how to develop a good habit, how to break a bad habit. What's the best thing they can do to break bad habits?
Well, we are trapped by bad habits because these bad habits lead us here to the basic brain, to the reptilian brain, the brain that wants to be protected, not be exposed to new learning or new skills. So a bad habit has been installed, as it says, as a habit of being who I am, either good or wrong, but we don't dare to break those habits because they represent a safe way of behaving. So to break with bad habits, first of all, you have to create the vision of who do you want to become. For instance, drinking or smoking or doing drugs or whatever, or being lazy, also being in front of the television all day long is a terribly bad habit because after all, we are energy. And so you're not using your energy in new ways. And this is the beginning of dying, the beginning of becoming a parasite of your own life. So to break a bad habit or a negative habit that is not helping you starts with the determination of doing so, recognizing there's a bad habit installed in you, and then breaking the pattern. It could be, how do I get rid of a bad habit? Is every habit has three forms: what we see, what we hear, and what we feel. So if you want to break the bad habit of drinking, for instance, first you have to recognize what is the pleasure this bad habit is bringing to you. And then recognize at least three new ways of installing a new habit and learning how to feel in a way where you're going to count on yourself, become your best. If it is about listening, very often we get used to listening to our inner voice, our worst enemy. And this is, it's useless. You cannot do it. Whatever you do is going to be the same, etc. You have to make silence of this way of talking to yourself. And once you start doing so, you're going to change the voices, internal voices, and also create an image of yourself, a visual image of who do you want to become. How do you want to be seen after a while? Maybe dress in a different way, change your hairdo, or change your looks. Why? Because if you continue looking in the same way, listening to the same, and feeling the same, it's impossible to break with these bad habits.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that, because that's, developing new habits is kind of obvious most of the time, right? Like if you want to improve your health, go to the gym, right? And then do something. But how do you break the bad habits? That's always been the thing that I wrestle with, and I think so many of our listeners do. So let's talk about this, Maria. You've learned from some of the masters, and I know John Grinder's somebody that you're a big fan of. You want to talk a little bit about what you've learned from him over the years?
Oh, yeah. I've met John Grinder some 28 years ago. Those days I was struggling in my business. I was doing the same I could, etc. And suddenly I get to fly to Sweden, where I saw the use of NLP in a company called Davenil. Then I flew to Paris, where there's a cousin of mine working at a research department in in Paris, and she told me she was treating children with cancer with something called neurolinguistic programming, which I didn't know a word about. And then I came back to Mexico, and I was told John was teaching a course in the United States. So I flew down to see him. Of course, at the beginning, I arrived with the same arrogance of any scientist, wanting to challenge new beliefs. And there he was. After the third day, I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was thinking. He had been with some of the masterminds in the world. So some like Milton Erickson, like Virginia Satir, etc. And he had been learning from these masterminds. And he was sharing with us everything about learning how to think, not in order of how to avoid my bad habits, but how to create new valuable habits. His idea was to learn from the best. As we said, the primitive brain is always going to look for weaknesses or bad things. And John was looking for what is best in the world, and the best minds ever, the Enlightenment. And he recognized that in the brain, there are the three areas that we just talked about: what we hear, what we feel, and the colors or the visual representation of what we see, and then create the positive ones. So meeting John, he became a master to me. I told him about my desire of creating a way of learning languages in a very easy way, and he was usually helping me to find new ways of making a mind work at its best. So he's one of the minds, the people I admire the most. He himself is a sportsman. He only has positive habits. And I think he represents one of the most positive things I can see in a human being.
Great, great. And how about, I know you've done some work with photo reading with Paul Shell as well. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Paul was teaching a course about photo reading in Mexico, and I went to visit him. Of course, those days I was very poor, so I said, "What about trading, Paul? I'll teach you how to learn Spanish fast, and you'll teach me how to photo read." And so it was fascinating because he had also studied some neurolinguistic programming, and he was using the best on how the mind thrives when reading. We know that reading is a habit that was created more than 500 years ago. And the way we read in the printed paper. And he taught me how to use the brain in order to run through the pages in a way where you can learn the content of a book in only maybe 20 minutes. And so Paul was one of the minds that motivated me to see how we can actually use the brain at an amazing rate. So he's now has a doctoral degree, and he was mentioned as one of the brightest minds in the world compared to Stephen Hawking. And yeah, he's really an example on how to learn in a fast way.
Wow. And I think one of the things I've heard him say, because I did a little research for our interview, was to not to read a book, but to study a book. And I've heard that from a few other people as well along the way, along the years. But it's interesting that concept alone can change how we read, where we study something instead of just reading it contextually, just to really study what is the author really trying to teach us. So brilliance again. Another brilliant person you worked with, Tony Buzan, with mind mapping. Tell us about mind mapping.
When I was young and working in radiology, I remember I used to work in a dark room by developing the radiographs, the X-rays. And so it was impossible for me to read the way I read or take notes the way everybody notes. So I used to make drawings of what I was learning. Yes, what you said about Paul. For me, going to school was not about being there, but understanding, learning at the same time. So I'm a lefty, I'm left-handed, and I was always taking colors. I always bring colors with me. And so I was making drawings of what I was understanding. Then I understood that words are only maps. And I realized that by printing your ideas in drawings is more powerful than taking notes word by word. And so my mind was learning at the same time. And then when I met Tony Busan in England at the Institute of Directors, I was really surprised because what he was creating was real books about how to take notes, how to represent information. And actually, he emphasized the idea of using colors, was going to invite the right side of the brain. You know, the left side of the brain is the logical, mathematical, intelligent area of the brain. But the right side of the brain is creative, intuitive, emotional, etc. And when you use the colors, you bind both areas of the brain. And by using the same drawings that I used to use, your idea works, inviting both areas of the brain to work together, which is fascinating.
You know, one of the greatest titles of a book I've ever heard, and I know you're a big fan and you've worked with the author of it, Emotional Intelligence. I remember when it first came out a number of years ago, and owner of a company here in Dallas I was working with gave me a copy of it. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and Daniel Goleman.
Wow, yeah. I went to San Diego to attend a course with him, with a friend called Kathleen Quinn. She is the director of a leadership university in South Pacific, California. And suddenly we were there, and actually I was lost at first and didn't arrive to the hotel on time. And then I said, well, this is the first challenge of this course. How to face being lost in a foreign country and making it on time to get to the course. And what I understood from Goleman was that there are basically two emotions: negative ones that are going to be like very, very activating our brain in a way that we are not receptive. All the negative emotions like fear, anger, comparison, etc., create certain levels of the brain of not having a functional brain. And yet, the other group of emotions that are the ones that he defines as positive are divided in two groups. First is self-knowledge. How were you created in a way where you actually recognize the emotions by which you live by, and how to manage those emotions. And the second intelligence he described is the knowledge of others. How would you recognize the emotions that your communication creates in others in a way where you can recognize them and then use that knowledge in your favor and the favor of others.
Yep. It was an amazing book. I remember reading it, and the impact was, the book was as good as the title, which sometimes they're not, as we both know, right? Sometimes the title's great and you read the book and you go, well, where's the real stuff? But I remember reading that, and the impact was amazing. And it's influenced so many companies in not only in network marketing, but in the Fortune 500 world. So let me ask you about that, because I know you do a lot of work with Fortune 500 companies, many different fields, obviously, many different performers in many different fields. If you had to break it down to three things that make that difference, that important difference of, be it an individual or a leader in a company achieving, what are those three things that we can do to achieve, that the achievers do, that maybe we're not doing today, or we know we should be doing, we're not doing enough of?
Okay. Maybe the first one is regarding emotional intelligence, getting to know yourself. As a leader, we create the same impact that a child receives with a grown-up. This is 80% of how we behave is going to impact our organization. So the first thing is get to know yourself. Don't forget about the visual impact you create in your organization, and always have a positive expression when your people are seeing you, and also a nice word to salute, to say hi to your personnel. The second thing is recognize the impact of the words you use. At Bimbo, one of the world's most important companies for the bread industry, I realized how Don Lorenzo Servitje, the owner, who passed away recently, just by using one word, he was going to impact the hundreds of thousands of people around his company, because people don't want to miss a word. So if you are a real leader, you have to take care of the wording you use, how you use the words. And the third one is how to become a center where people are going to be the best of themselves. This is when you create a company, it's not about you anymore. It's about every member of the organization. So you have to follow like a story of how did this person arrive in my organization, and how am I helping him to thrive, to be his best, to become the best representation of himself in his own life, with his family, and within a team.
So,
I think.
So how does, I love everything you just said there. So let me ask you two questions based on that. Best advice for someone to become the best version of themselves at all times, not only in the business world, but when they step out of the business world and their mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or member of the community at large. What's the best way for them to become the best version of themselves?
The best way is by having these habits. Since we as human beings are an addition of habits, as adults, we can choose the habits that bring the best out of in us. And the first one is exercise every day as much as you can. Get rid of this toxic thinking, of this negative way of thinking that is natural in the human beings. And if you are the example of all that people who want to become themselves, you inspire them just by looking at you. And if you do so, people are going to long to be around you. I remember at one of the largest banks here in Mexico, I used to say to the director, don't make this the chit chat area. Make it a refreshing area. When people come to see you, make it so fresh, so about them, that people get out of your office being inspired, being able to conquest every bit of the assignments they have to deal with, and to believe in themselves. So that's what a leader does in any organization.
So let me ask you this. I've interviewed a lot of people over the last year or so. And of course, I've been a student of self-development since I'm 17, and I don't want to tell you how old I am now, but I hit senior citizen here a couple of months ago. And when we talk about a favorite word, because you're absolutely so right about that. One word can make a difference, right? And I think, for example, when I read Og Mandino's book about the greatest salesman in the world, the word equanimity is a word that comes from that book that I think about. When I think about the very first book I ever read about self-development when I was 17, which was by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale about the power of positive thinking, the word that I still go back to sometimes and have to remind myself of many, many times is tranquility. I love that word. Matter of fact, I think when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, I think he called it tranquility base or something, if I remember right. I may be wrong about that. But if you had a favorite word, Maria, that gives you that peace, that clarity, that ability to move forward in such a positive way like you have, and you lead so many people, and you're so wonderful at what you do and so inspirational, and you're such an incredible teacher. But if you had that one word sometimes that you're going on stage and they're introducing you and you say, wow, what's that word?
Balance. Balance is the key word I always bring in my mind. There's always something negative or something positive, but as long as you're in balance, everything is going to work fine.
Wow, great. So let me kind of share with everybody here. This is the Leaving Nothing to Chance podcast. You can listen to our podcast every Tuesday on Spotify, on Apple, on iTunes, I think we're up to 7 or 8 other stations now that have picked us up, Maria. So we're growing a little bit. And what I always like to do at this point, Maria, is to come back to you as the person who the call is about and give you the last word. What's your best advice for people to move their lives forward, move their network marketing businesses forward? We have some non-network marketing listeners that listen, friends of mine that are in different things for a living, but a lot of them that are in leadership positions, whether they're leadership in the home only in some cases, but most of them are also in leadership in some sort of a business that they lead, or even in some cases, and some of them are in ministry that they lead. What's your best advice to help them to move forward today to a better place tomorrow?
I think my best advice is get a good coach. There's not one single human being nowadays that can be his best without belonging to a group of people. But you still need, you're an eagle, you tend to fly by yourself, you tend to find solutions by yourself. But try to find a good coach to ask questions, doubts, receive feedback anytime you need it. So I think that the best people in the world are humble enough as to know they cannot know everything. And if they can find a good advisor, a good coach for them, that would be my advice. Try to find a coach that actually represents whatever you call success, and that can live by leaving his steps behind, and that really inspires you. Someone you admire, someone you can get close to, and in trouble sometimes, as well as during happy moments of success is always going to be there for you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let me just ask you this to Maria. I know some of the people are going to want to reach you, going to want to reach out to you and to your company in some of your speaking and some of your teaching that you do, not only in Mexico and the United States, but throughout the world. I know it's been a little tough the last little while, right, for all of us traveling wise, but things are opening up a little bit, thank God. If they want to reach you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best would be to contact me through my page. It is www.pfi, Practical Education for Executives.com.mx. P as in Peter, E as in elegant, F as in fortune, E as in elegant.com.mx.
Even what you use to describe that's all positive. I love that. And we'll put it in the show notes as well. The show notes will be attached to the call as well. But I want to thank you so much once again. You're inspiring. You're a wonderful teacher. You're a wonderful inspiration to people. And I know you've blessed and helped so many people. And I know what I've learned from you so far has been tremendous. We've been applying some of it and it really works. And once again, thank you so much for your time today and your continued wisdom and leadership.
Thank you so much, John, and to your audience and to your wonderful leadership. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.